Good morning, everyone. Today we're talking with Kate Almquist. Kate Almquist Knopf. I hope I pronounce it well.
Correct.
She is an independent consultant and expert on Sudan and South Sudan. Kate has served as Assistant Administrator for Africa for USAID, the agency, the international agency, the U.S. Agency for International Development. She was a mission director in Sudan. And Kate is also a former fellow at the Center for Global Development, and something that we're proud, she is an adjunct professor here at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Kate will share with us today the latest analysis on the ongoing crisis in South Sudan. Good morning, Kate.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I will go with the first question with the specialist, Paul.
Thank you. Welcome to ACSS. Always great to have you here.
Thank you, Paul.
Now, Kate, a lot of things have been happening from the time you testified on the Hill about the crisis that has been ongoing in South Sudan. We now, more recently, saw the signing of a cessation of hostilities agreement and a separate agreement that was sort of committing both sides, sort of laying out a roadmap in terms of the release of the political detainees. Now that this cessation of hostilities agreement has been signed, and ceasefire monitors are now going to be deployed on the ground, hopefully, what, in your view, should the next steps in the peace process look like?
Well, the very first point is that the cessation of hostilities needs to be implemented. And so while it has had a calming effect on some of the fighting inside South Sudan, particularly in some of the key regional capital cities that had seen some of the worst conflict, there's still fighting reported going on in some of the more rural areas and in the counties of Unity State and Jonglei State and even Upper Nile State. And so the fighting hasn't ceased yet, and that's the very first point that still needs to happen. The humanitarian agencies are reporting that the numbers of displaced and people seeking refuge in the United Nations compounds and in the informal IDP camps, those numbers are still increasing. So that suggests that people are still fearing for their safety. And those who are in the UN compounds say that they're not ready to leave and go back home yet. So the very first point is that we still need to get the cessation of hostilities fully implemented. That would be helped a lot if the ceasefire monitors, the monitoring and verification mechanism, those teams could get deployed as quickly as possible. They haven't yet reached the key fighting areas on the ground, and so that's very, very important. The next step will be looking forward to next week. The parties are meant to reconvene in Addis to consider political talks and what the interim political arrangements can be going forward for South Sudan.
Right. I think that would be that's a great point for my next question. You've talked about the political aspect. The political issues, the underlying issues in the conflict, the institutional issues, and when you testified on the Hill, you noted that those detainees represent a political constituency, so to speak, that would need to be included in the process to make sure that the process is much more inclusive and goes beyond just a cessation of hostilities. Now, 7 of those detainees have now been released, but they're now in Nairobi, Kenya,
right.
And it's not clear whether they will participate in the next round of peace talks. And 4 of them remain in detention in South Sudan. How, in your view, could this element of the crisis, essentially these detainees, be brought into this process to make it more inclusive?
Well, it's a very good question. The significance of these detainees, the 11 that were arrested after the fighting broke out in Juba, is that they're all senior members of the SPLM, the ruling party inside South Sudan. And the political issue that triggered the conflict emerged from a very heated discussion within the ruling party's mechanisms in terms of some of their leadership discussions. So having these individuals sidelined and not participating means that there will be very little possibility for that party, the SPLM, to go through a reconciliation and reform process so that they can arrive at their key institutional documents that they still need in order to be able to register as a political party in South Sudan. Even the ruling party is not registered as a political party currently in the country, and then that then paves the way for them to field a candidate for the next presidential election. So if we don't have these individuals participating in that discussion and they remain on the side of the talks and they still have dissenting views, they still have key constituencies inside South Sudan, then we really haven't dealt with the underlying cause there. But I would just add that beyond the 11 that were originally detained and the 4 that still need to be released to also participate in the discussions, many South Sudanese have their own perspective on what the issues are with the government and with the political process inside the country, and may or may not align themselves either under President Kiir or former Vice President Riek Machar, and may yet have still differing views. So what's very interesting is that we're seeing lots of civil society voices and other citizen movements coming to the fore and saying we want to have a say in the political arrangements too, and that will be the real key for having inclusive political talks, is to go even beyond the leadership of the SPLM.
But you've talked about all the parties at play here, all the key players in this political crisis, but there's a sort of expectation for South Sudan, especially 2015 and the upcoming election. At this point, what are the perspectives for that event or that landmark event to happen?
Right. So normally there should be an election in 2015 for president and governors of the states and at the local levels. They should have drafted a new permanent constitution since becoming independent. They've had a transitional constitution in place. They need a new permanent constitution, and then that should have set the rules for the next elections to come. Even before this violence broke out, that process was very far behind schedule, both on the constitutional drafting side as well as on preparing for the elections, and they should have another census, and there are a number of steps that should be taken place before we get to that point. I think it's very hard now, given the violence and the political rupture that's happened in the country, to see how a 2015 timeline can hold. But this, of course, will be a key point for the mediators to work with the parties in the political talks on, and for the broader population of South Sudan to then see a time frame that they can have confidence and see the roadmap for when they will be able to elect and have their say on who they want to lead their country, right? So even if it's not going to be in 2015, it's going to be very important that it's clear when those elections might come, so that that horizon is there for the entire citizenry.
One of the major players in this conflict, in this ongoing crisis, is Uganda. So how do you see the role of Uganda? Because it looks like Uganda is backing President Salva Kiir, especially politically and maybe at some point with equipment. How do you see the role of Uganda in this crisis?
Right. So it is widely reported that the Ugandan army, and I think President Museveni himself acknowledged it in a speech he gave somewhere in Angola, I think, recently, that the UPDF is in fact fighting alongside the SPLA on the pro-government SPLA, since many units of the army have defected and are in opposition now. But those forces still under Salva Kiir's command. President Museveni has reinforced with his own army and forces. They were instrumental. It's reported in the government retaking the town of Bor, the capital of Jonglei State, and they may still be inside the country fighting in other places right now. That, I think, complicates the reconciliation and the political process quite a bit to have foreign forces in there fighting on either side, frankly, and foreign backing. I think President Museveni could play a very important role in the political reconciliation that needs to take place because of his long and deep relationships with many of the key actors in South Sudan politics, including the president and others who have been under detention, and his voice would be very useful as a mediator, but it's complicated and somewhat compromised, I think, by him having forces fighting on one side of the equation. So it would really be best, and in fact the cessation of hostilities says that the allied forces, the foreign forces need to redeploy, to pull back, and in fact I think they should go back to Uganda, and both parties need to separate their fighting elements and cease hostilities.
Right. I'll just, I'd like to follow up with just one last question. The United States has been engaged in South Sudan for many years. It's come out in the press that the U.S. played an extremely important role in the independence of South Sudan. But U.S. engagement goes much, much further back, to the days of the rebellion. When the SPLM was engaging in this war. But in the U.S., there are very important constituencies of the SPLM. There's a bipartisan support, in Congress for the people of South Sudan and all that. So the United States has been a very important player. What leverage, at this stage, given that the U.S. is one of the countries that has called on President Salva Kiir to release those detainees, to make sure that the process is more inclusive. What leverage does the U.S. have to ensure that these things do happen, and to ensure that we get to a process that is much more inclusive, and which leads us to potentially a sustainable resolution of this conflict?
Well, as you rightly note, the United States and South Sudan have a long history with each other, and decades of engagement and effort trying to support the people of Southern Sudan and now South Sudan in their struggle to have the basic conditions to facilitate not just life, but also to be able to thrive and to grow and develop. And so the independence of the country 2 years ago was a very hopeful moment for the people of South Sudan, and one that the United States, I think, did contribute significantly in helping to bring about. So we have a special relationship, but that doesn't mean that we can just give an opinion or give some advice and counsel to President Kiir or to other members of the government, and they automatically do what the United States thinks would be best. And so it is a process of ongoing engagement and dialogue and relationship with the leadership inside South Sudan and with the people of South Sudan, to encourage them to find the path back to inclusive political processes, to more democratic governance, to some more accountability between the government and the people. And I think the release this week to Kenya of the 7 of the 11 political detainees is a good sign of a confidence-building measure from President Kiir and his government. So we should certainly welcome that and commend that, and hope and encourage that he'll also do the same with the other 4 who remain under detention, in the spirit of facilitating some political reconciliation and broader healing and reconciliation for the country. And I think the United States can continue to play a strong role, but certainly many other voices are also encouraging President Kiir in this regard too, both international partners as well as from within the region and the African Union. And so really it's the collective effort that I think will make the difference here. So.
And thank you, Kate. Thank you for giving us all those insights. I think you will be with us in about a week for a roundtable on South Sudan with other specialists to give us more insight and more information about the evolving situation. Thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you.